A reading from Luke 12. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich toward God." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the wild flowers grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today, and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it. For the pagan world runs after such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. Last week, we started a new series, 3-week series, on the joy of generosity. And if you missed it, I want to encourage you to go back and listen to it, which feels a little weird to say, you should all go listen to my sermon. But I never do that. But that sermon really sets the stage. This week kind of doesn't make sense without really kind of listening to what we talked about last week. We're doing this 3-week series on money. And I know some of you are like, I knew it. I haven't been to church in a long time. Money. The church is always talking about money. We're about 8.5 years old as a church. And this is the first sermon series we've actually ever done on money, on generosity. We really don't talk about it very much. But Jesus talked about it all the time. I said this last week that it was, in many ways, his most favorite topic. He talked about money more than he talked about anything else. And there were a couple points that we hit on last week that are worth just saying again. Number one, why does Jesus talk so much about money? He talks about money so much, not because he's trying to guilt trip you. It's not the point of this series. The reason Jesus talks about money so much is because he knows you and he loves you. We think about money all the time. We stress about it, we worry about it. It keeps us up at night. What kind of friend, what kind of God would this be if he did not talk to us about the thing that most of us think the most about? He talks about it because he knows us and he loves us. 2, he talks about money not because he wants something from you, but because he wants something for you. Oh, you okay? Okay. I'm a dad. Oh, I don't even know them. Okay. 2, he talks about money not because he wants something from you, but because he wants something for you. He wants you. He does not want your money to control you. He wants you to control your money. And he wants you to live in the freedom and the joy of generosity. Now, why does God want you to live in generosity? Because God is generous. We talked about that last week. Generosity is one of the core attributes of God. What is God like? God is generous. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave. He gave his one and only Son, that whoever believed in him would have eternal life. God is generous, and God's people are to reflect God's character to the world. One of the main ways we do that is through generosity. Now, let's just be honest. Let's real talk for just a moment, okay? We all struggle with this. We all struggle with generosity. My wife and I have these cookies that we love to eat most nights after dinner. They're so good. And the other night I went to get the cookies and there was only one cookie. And I thought, man, it's so sad my wife is not going to get a cookie tonight. Like, it's just not our impulse. Generosity is it's not instinctive for us. Martin Luther, he once said, Christians go through 3 conversions: the conversion of their head, their heart, and their pocketbook. Unfortunately, not all at the same time. And it is often the case that of all the things in our life that we are willing to give to God, our money tends to be the last. We tend to be very tight-fisted. So my hope for this series is not that we all feel terrible at the end of it. My hope is that we grow together. Actually, that's the hope. The hope is that we grow together as individuals and as a church in the freedom and joy of generosity. Now today, we come to this really famous story that Jesus told, and it's called the parable of the rich fool. And what I love about this parable is that it really gets underneath the surface and it gets at the reason of why generosity is so hard for us, why it's such a struggle for us. This passage is sort of like walking into the doctor's office, and Jesus, who the Bible calls the great physician, begins to peel back the layers of our hearts and expose this sickness, this money sickness that is in all of us. And it is actually keeping us from living in the freedom and the joy of generosity. See, when it comes to money, we are not well. I wonder if you know this about yourself. We are not well. There is a sickness in all of us. Doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter how little money you have. You can be rich or poor, but there's a sickness in all of us. And because Jesus knows us and loves us and wants something from us and not for us, he exposes it in order to heal it. So here's how we're going to look at this passage this morning. We're going to see 3 things: the symptoms of the sickness, the causes of the sickness, and then the cure for the sickness. The symptoms, the causes, and the cure. So first, the symptoms. Okay, how do you diagnose a disease? Most of us think the way you diagnose something is you go online and you research it. Like, the internet has made us think we're all medical professionals, and most of us are not. Some of you are, but most of us are not. The way that doctors diagnose a disease is by looking at the symptoms. And Jesus mentions 2 symptoms of money sickness in this passage. See if you can relate to either of them. The first symptom shows up in the parable. A man comes to Jesus and he says, "Tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And I love Jesus' response. He says, "Man," can you just hear, man, what was the tone of the man? You know, "Man, who made me judge between you and your brother?" Jesus this is kind of Jesus' way of saying, I am the Messiah, not a family attorney, okay? This is not what I came to do. But then Jesus says something that diagnoses what is going on in the heart of this man and his brother. He says in verse 15, "Watch out, be on your guard, against all kinds of greed. And that's the first symptom. The first symptom of money sickness is greed. And greed is a heart that says, I need more. Have you ever thought that? Have you ever felt that? I need more. I want more. What I have is not enough. You got the sickness. Here's the interesting thing about greed. Jesus says, watch out, be on your guard. It's sort of like saying, take heed, stay alert. And Jesus doesn't talk this way about any other sin. You know, Jesus never says, watch out, be on your guard against adultery. He doesn't have to. You know, adultery, you know when you're committing adultery. No one is like, oh my gosh, I thought you were my spouse. You know, no, it's obvious. It's obvious. But greed isn't. See, that's the point. It's sneaky. It's hard to identify. Watch out. Be on your guard. I'll prove this to you. Everybody knows there are greedy people in the world, but none of us think we're one of them. I was talking to a good friend a couple years ago about money, and he was kind of listening to me talk for a little bit, and he got real quiet, and he said, Brent, sounds like you're struggling with greed. I said, I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think that's what's going on at all. It's hard to identify. It's sneaky. I have been a pastor for over 2 decades. I've sat with more people than I can remember who have come to confess like a litany of struggles in their life, to confess addictions, to confess anger, to confess adultery, to confess lust, to confess contentment towards their spouse, to confess bitterness, to confess all of these things. Not a single time in over 2 decades has someone come and said, I think my problem is greed. I think that's really what I'm really struggling with here. It's sneaky. It's hard to identify. And here's what this means. It means that if you think you don't have the sickness, you probably do. Because greed is a symptom of a disease whose defining symptom is believing you don't have the disease. Watch out. Be on your guard. That's the first symptom. The second symptom comes in the teaching right after the parable. Jesus says in verse 22, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. And in verse 25, who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? And that's the second symptom. The second symptom of the sickness is worry. See, greed is a heart that says, I want more, I need more. And worry is a heart that says, will I have enough? Now, have you ever thought that? Have you ever felt that? Have you ever been afraid that you won't have enough? Some of us have been afraid we won't have enough to put food on the table, to pay our bills, to pay off our debts, to send our kids to college, to live the life that we dream about living, to save for retirement. See, have you ever been anxious about money? Have you ever thought, will I have enough? And it means you got the sickness. I mean, this passage, it is like going in to the doctor for your annual checkup. You think it's just a normal checkup. Everything is good. And the doctor looks at you and says, you're not going home today. Clear your calendar. We are sending you straight into surgery. You are sick. And Jesus is saying, we've all got this sickness. We've all got greedy hearts that think, I need more, and hearts that worry, will I have enough? Those are the symptoms. Let's talk about the causes. Let's talk about the causes because here's the thing. You never get better if you just treat the symptoms, right? Every good doctor says, we can't just treat the symptoms. We got to get to the root of the problem, the root of what is actually causing this. And Jesus gives it to us in this passage in 2 false beliefs about money. See if you can relate to either one of these. The first false belief is this: money will make me significant. There's a word that Jesus keeps repeating in this passage, and it's the word life. I don't know if you caught it when we were reading it, but verse 15, life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Verse 22, do not worry about your life. Verse 23, for life is more than food. And the word that Jesus uses for life is not just talking about your physical life, your physical existence. It's much more than that. It conveys meaning, significance, fulfillment, life. It's kind of like when my kids were young and we'd stay in a hotel and we'd order room service and they're like eating their pancakes on the bed, watching their show, and they're like, this is the life, this is the life. And Jesus is saying, money can't get you that. It cannot buy you life. It cannot buy you meaning. It cannot buy you significance. It cannot buy you worth. It cannot make you matter. And part of this sickness is that we think it can. We look to money to make us feel attractive, to make us feel important, to make us feel desirable, to make us feel like we are somebody. And money cannot do that. In fact, here's how the disease works. The more you look to money for significance, the less significant you feel. There was an article several years ago, came out in the New York Times. It was titled, "Why Does Everyone Feel So Insecure All the Time?" And it was really interesting because they were talking about kind of how the wealthiest people, specifically they were actually talking about all the billionaires in Silicon Valley, how it is so often the case that the wealthiest people tend to feel the most insignificant and emotionally insecure. And the article is like, kind of, why is this a thing? And it went on to talk about what economists call fractal inequality. Fractal inequality. And this is what the article said. It said the person who is in debt looks to the person with $0, who looks to the person who has $50,000, who looks to the person who has six figures, who looks to the person who has $500,000, who looks to the person who has $1 million, who looks to the person with twice as many assets, and on and on and on. And the fractal's spiral never ends. You see, the point is that we're all of us, no matter kind of where you are in the socioeconomic ladder, like we're all looking up at whoever's in the next rung and thinking, if I can just get there, then I'll have life. But then you get there, or you don't. And if you do, you're just looking up at the next rung. The spiral never ends. The more you look to money for significance, the less significant you feel. At the 2016 Golden Globes, when Jim Carrey walked onto the stage to present an award, when he was walking onto the stage, he was introduced as two-time Golden Globe winning actor Jim Carrey. And when he got up to the mic, he leans into the mic and he says, "Thank you. I am two-time Golden Globe winner Jim Carrey. And when I go to sleep at night, I'm not just a guy going to sleep. I am two-time Golden Globe winner Jim Carrey, going to get some well-needed shut-eye. And when I dream, I don't just dream any old dream. No, sir. I dream about being three-time Golden Globe winning actor Jim Carrey. Because then I would be enough, and it would finally be true, and I could stop this terrible search for what I know ultimately won't fulfill me." Soon after that acceptance speech, he said this. He said, "I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer." Jesus is saying in this passage, money is not the answer. It cannot give you significance. It cannot give you life. It cannot give you meaning. and the sicknesses that we think it can. We think that having more makes us more. We have come to confuse net worth with human worth in our society. And that's the first cause. And people who struggle with this tend to be very materialistic and greedy, spend a lot of time on Amazon Prime, always wanting more, always needing more, never feeling like you have enough, always spending more. And some of you are like, that is not me. That's my spouse or my friend, but that's not me. Because I'm a saver. I'm not a spender, I'm a saver. That means you've got the second cause of the sickness. The second false belief in this passage is not money will make me significant, but it's money will make me safe. The rich man in the parable says to himself, I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain, and I'll say to myself, this guy's talking to himself a lot, by the way. You have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Now, do you see the connection? He thinks that because he's got money, he's got many years left. And the way Jesus tells the parable is his life is taken from him that night. The whole point of the parable is to show you that money cannot make you safe. It cannot protect you. People who look to money to make them safe tend to be not spenders but savers. You tuck it away, right? Build bigger barns. Always anxious about it, always worried you won't have enough. You can hardly give any of it away, if any of it at all. Why? Because Jesus is saying, because you've got the sickness. You've been infected. Now, there's a really important caveat here. This is really important. Please hear this. The Bible talks a lot about being financially wise. It talks a lot about saving. It talks a lot about not going into debt. It talks a lot about hard work. It talks about planning for the future. These things are wise. This is, by the way, this is why we do our financial management class every year. We did it last spring, and it was great. We're going to offer it again, just to give people some really basic, practical stuff on how do you handle your money. Saving is not wrong, but please hear this. There's a big difference between saving that is driven by wisdom versus saving that is driven by the false belief that money can make you safe. Just think for a moment about the words that get thrown around in the financial world. Investments are called securities. We put assets into trust. We keep our money in safe deposit boxes. We have emergency funds or rainy day funds for when life goes wrong. We talk about having a safety net or being financially secure. I mean, if we are honest, deep down, there is part of us that thinks money can make us safe, and Jesus is saying, it's all an illusion. Your money cannot protect you. Proverbs 11:4 is one of the most kind of striking verses in the whole Bible. It says, wealth is worthless in the day of wrath. The day of wrath is the trouble that awaits you in life. Now, if you're poor, you're never under the illusion that life isn't going to get hard, because you're not buffered. You're not buffered from difficulty. But if you have money, you can actually go through a little bit of a stretch of life thinking that you are in control and that trouble is never going to come to you. And Jesus is saying, oh no, it's coming. And you're going to realize how not in control you are. And when the day of wrath comes, your money's not going to be able to protect you. It's not going to be able to shield you, and it's not going to be able to help you. We need something that can, don't we? We need something that can actually make us safe. We need something that can actually make us feel significant. We need something that can heal our sickness and free us from greed and worry. And the good news of this passage is that Jesus, the great physician, gives it to us. He gives us the cure. The cure. Now, as I have just meditated on this passage this week and studied it, here's what has really stuck out to me. Jesus tells this parable on money, and then right after that, he goes into a very long teaching about money. That's verses 22 to 34. And in that teaching, he repeatedly refers to God as Father. Verse 29, do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it. For the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. Verse 32, do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Jesus keeps referring to God as Father, and that's the cure. The cure to money sickness is actually knowing God as Father. Now, some of you here this morning, you've been around church for a long time. You've been in religious circles for a long time. You say, I believe in God. Yeah, I believe in God. Others of you, you've delved into lots of different kind of spiritualities, lots of different religions, and you say, yeah, I'm not like an atheist. I believe in God. I think there's a spiritual reality to the world. Some of you have been through 12-step programs, and you say, yeah, I believe in a higher power. I believe in God. It is one thing to believe in God. It is a totally different thing to know him as your Father. And that is the difference between someone who is not a Christian and someone who is. It's to know God as your Father. Now, think about this. It's only as you know him as your Father that you can actually be healed with your money. What does a father do? What does a good father do? What does a good parent do? Two things. They protect their children, they keep them safe, and they shower them with praise. Some of you did not have a parent like that. But that is what a good parent does. To the parents in this room, this is what God calls you to do with your children. A good father, a good parent does two things. They protect their children and they shower them with praise. They care for them and they tell them how loved they are. Not because of anything that they've done, but simply because of the nature of the relationship, because the place that that child has in the parent's heart. A good parent gives their child security and significance. Now, when you look to your money to give you those things, you are asking your money to give you things that only God can. Only God can give you those things. Only God can give you security, safety, and significance. And Jesus points that out in this passage. In verse 24, he says, consider the ravens. Jesus kind of goes into show and tell mode. He says, look at the birds. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, and yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Jesus is saying, look how God cares for the birds. Look how he takes care of them. And they're just birds. I mean, birds are great. But Jesus is like, but you're people. If God takes care of the birds, how much more is he going to care for you? He is saying, you have a Father who cares for you. You are not alone in this world. God has not left you to fend for yourself. You know, we worry, will I have enough? Am I safe? And God says, I've got you. You were in the palm of my hand. I've known you before the foundation of the world. Not a hair can fall from your head apart from my fatherly care. The day of trouble is coming, and your money is not going to be of no use to you, but I will be with you in that day. I will be with you in that moment. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. See, God doesn't just give us security, but Jesus goes on, he gives us significance. Jesus says in verse 27, consider how the wild flowers grow. They do not labor or spin, and yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you? Jesus is saying, do you see how beautiful these flowers are? Look at them. Look, do you see the beauty that God has bestowed on these flowers? How much more beautiful are you to him? We don't just worry if we will have enough. We worry if we are enough. We look to our money to make us feel important, significant, attractive, beautiful, desirable. And Jesus is saying, only God can do that for you. Only your Father can do that for you. Only God can give you that kind of significance. You know why? Because God owns everything. He owns everything, and yet his most treasured possession is you. This is what Jesus is saying in these verses. You have a Father. Author Philip Yancey tells the story of visiting his elderly mother, and while he was visiting her, she started pulling out all of these old family pictures, all the old photo albums. And there was this one picture that she pulled out of him as a newborn. He was just an infant. And the picture was all crumpled up. It's all messed up. And he said, what's the story with this picture? And she began to explain to him that when he was just 10 months old, his father was diagnosed with polio. And his dad would only live 4 more months after that. And those 4 months were spent flat on his back, lying down in what was called an iron lung. An iron lung is what kept you alive in those days when you had polio. And in those days, they thought polio was infectious, and so Philip's dad was not allowed to see his newborn son. Couldn't come into the room. So Philip's mom had taken this picture of Philip when he was just a baby, and she had placed it in the iron lung directly above his dad's eyes. For the last 4 months of his dad's life, Philip's dad looked at that picture of his son. And this is what he writes about that. He says, I've often thought of that crumpled photo, for it is one of the few links connecting me to the stranger who was my father, someone I have no memory of, no sensory knowledge of, spent all day, every day, thinking of me, devoting himself to me, loving me. The emotions I felt when my mother showed me the crumpled photo were the same emotions I felt one February night in a college dorm room when I first believed in God. Someone like my father is there, I realized. Someone is there every day thinking of me, loving me. It was a startling feeling of wild hope, a feeling so new and overwhelming that it seemed fully worth risking my life on. Some of you are here this morning trying to figure out, what is a Christian? What does it mean to believe this stuff? And here's what it means. It means to know that you have a Father, to know that you have someone who is devoted to you, thinking of you, loving you, has his eye on you, knows your every need, and has promised to take care of you. And when that begins to sink in, your heart starts to get healed. Starts to get healed from greed, always needing more. Starts to get healed from worry, always wondering if you'll have enough. You stop looking to your money to give you things that only God can. And you begin to live in the freedom and joy of generosity. And you do what Jesus talks about at the end of this passage. You begin to give away your money in radical proportions. Why? Because you're healed. Because the great physician has undone this sickness that has infected all of us. Do you know that you have a Father? That is the cure. That is the key. If you don't know God as your Father, that is the starting place. You'll never make any progress in this area. And the question is, like, how do you even have that kind of relationship with God? How do you know God as a Father? Not just a king, not just a master, not just a shepherd, but how do you know him as your Father? How is that kind of relationship with God possible? And it is possible because of this table and the cross to which it points. Do you know that on the cross, when Jesus prayed, he cried out to God, my God, my God. Commentators, that has really jumped out to commentators because every other place in the Gospels, when Jesus prays, he begins his prayer with Father. And throughout the prayer, he calls God Father. But not on the cross. It is the one place where Jesus does not call God Father. In that moment, on the cross, Jesus was not just losing his life, he was losing his Father. When his day of wrath came, when his day of trouble came, the Father was not there to rescue him. See, he had always known, think about this, Jesus had always known what it meant to be safe and significant in his Father's eyes. But in that moment, he's losing the safety. There's no protection. He is naked and hanging on a cross, gasping for breath. He lost the significance. He lost the relationship. He lost it so that we could have it. This is what the gospel says. He lost it so that we could become sons and daughters and know God as our Father. On the cross, Jesus got the Father silent so that we can now get his protection and his praise. He got the Father's rejection so that we can now get the Father's love and acceptance. You have a Father, Jesus is saying, who cares for you. He is devoted to you, always thinking of you, always has you in his hands, can give you a safety and a significance that your money never can. Come to him. If you have never known him as your Father, you can know him as your Father today. On the night in which he was betrayed, the Lord Jesus took bread, and after he'd given thanks, he broke it. He said, "This is my body broken for you. Eat this in remembrance of me." And in the same way, after supper, he took the cup and he blessed it, saying, "This cup represents the new covenant which is shed in my blood for the forgiveness of sins. Drink this in remembrance of me." As often as we eat this bread and drink this cup, we proclaim the Lord's death until he comes again. Let's pray. Jesus, we thank you for everything that you have done for us in your life and in your death and in your resurrection to make a way for us into the family of God, to come to this table not just as servants, but to come as sons and daughters, to know you as our Father. And so, Father, would you meet us at this table with your love and your grace and your presence? You know all of the ways that we are suspicious of it. You know all of the ways that we come anxious, worried, feeling like we don't have enough, wanting more. Lord, meet us at this table in ways that only you can, we pray. In Christ's name, amen.